All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a massive question through the eyes of one of literature's all-time giants, Leo Tolstoy. See, in his later years, he turned that incredible mind of his to the world of art. And, well, the conclusions he came to were pretty shocking.
Okay, so let's get right into it. The interesting thing is, Tolstoy doesn't kick this off with some dry, philosophical argument. Nope, he starts with a story.
So he walks into this opera rehearsal, right? And what he sees just absolutely disgusts him. He peels back the curtain on all the glamour and finds something brutal, something that he sees as a cruel and just senseless machine. I mean, for Tolstoy, this wasn't just some messy practice session. This was a scene of genuine human suffering. He saw people being physically and mentally run into the ground, screamed at, totally exhausted. And for what? For a piece of so-called high art. And think about it. All this huge, expensive, and frankly cruel production, what was it for? It was all in service of a story that Tolstoy found completely and utterly disconnected from any kind of real human experience. A fantasy that had nothing to do with real life, but demanded this immense sacrifice.
So you can imagine seeing all this, it really gets him thinking. It forces him to ask this really fundamental question. What is this thing we call art that we think justifies all of this pain? He went looking to the philosophers for an answer, and honestly, all he found was a mess.
So like anyone would, he goes looking for answers from the experts, the philosophers. And you know what he finds? A whole lot of nothing. For a century and a half, all these great thinkers had basically tied themselves in knots trying to define beauty. The result was just this enchanted confusion of ideas that contradicted each other.
And really, the whole problem boils down to this huge contradiction. Is beauty some kind of perfect, mystical thing that's just out there? Or is it just, what we personally happen to like? Since nobody could agree, beauty turned out to be a totally useless foundation for figuring out what art is.
And this is where Tolstoy comes up with just a brilliant analogy. He says that defining art by the pleasure it gives us is exactly like saying the whole point of food is how good it tastes. Yeah, taste is great, but that's not the purpose. The real point of food is nourishment. So he wonders, what's the nourishment that art is supposed to give us? Okay, so this is his big aha moment. He decides, you know what? Forget beauty. Let's scrap that whole confusing idea. Instead, he asks a much simpler, more practical question. What does art actually do?
And what he lands on is that art isn't about beauty at all. It's about communication. It's this incredible human activity where one person takes a feeling they've actually lived through and through their art passes it on to someone else so that they feel it too. It's about creating a shared emotional experience.
And that right there gives him his ultimate test. He calls it infection. For Tolstoy, it's super simple. If a piece of art infects you with the same genuine emotion the artist actually felt, then it's real art. If it doesn't, it's not. That's it.
So armed with this powerful new tool, this infection test, Tolstoy takes a hard look at the art world around him. And his conclusion? Most of it is fake. He calls it counterfeit art, arguing that artists had pretty much forgotten how to express real feeling and were just using a bunch of tricks instead.
He basically identifies this sort of playbook, right? 4 common tricks artists use to fake it. They borrow old-timey poetic themes, they imitate reality with tons of little details, they use striking or shocking effects that just hit your nerves, or they make the work intellectually interesting, like a puzzle. All of these things might look like art, but they don't actually infect you with a real feeling.
So who does he put in the spotlight as the ultimate example of all this counterfeit art? None other than the celebrated composer Richard Wagner. For Tolstoy, Wagner's work was the absolute peak of everything wrong with modern art.
Yeah, for Tolstoy, Wagner's operas were like the perfect storm of all those counterfeit tricks, borrowed myths, big shocking effects, and this intellectual interestingness that, in his view, completely blocked any chance of a true emotional infection. It was a gigantic, complicated machine that produced zero genuine feeling.
Okay, so if he's throwing out almost everything, what's left? What does he actually think is good art? Because for him, it wasn't enough for art to just be infectious. The feeling it passed on had to be worthwhile.
He basically says good art falls into one of two buckets. First, you've got religious art,
And by that, he means art that gives us this feeling of unity, of human brotherhood. And then there's universal art. This is the stuff that connects us through the simple, everyday feelings that we all share, like the joy of a good joke, the tenderness of a lullaby, or the sadness of a loss.
So you see, in the end, for Tolstoy, art isn't just about making pretty things or having a nice time. It's a powerful, essential tool for humanity. It's what's supposed to tear down the walls between us and push us all towards a future of empathy and peace.
And that really leaves us with a pretty provocative question, doesn't it? If we're honest and we use Tolstoy's test of genuine emotional infection, how much of the art we consume every day, the music, the movies, the books, how much of it is real and how much is just a really clever counterfeit? Definitely something to think about.